You're listening to episode 654 of the Father Bills podcast. Welcome back. This week's episode is not given by me. The homily actually is given by our transitional deacon, Deacon Stephen Kenyon of the Archdiocese of Portland here in Oregon. And so this is the homily entitled, Power Perfected in Weakness, given on the 14th Sunday in Ordinary Time, 2018.
There's been a growing trend on TV recently of more what we might call reality talent shows. Shows like America's Got Talent or American Idol or The Voice. Shows where contestants come on and they compete to become the next star in certain talents, dancing, singing, magic tricks. And these shows can be pretty entertaining. You can see some extraordinary feats of talent, some incredible music, some amazing dances. But one of the most touching parts of these shows is a storyline that repeats pretty frequently. A person who no one believed in, who faced maybe some great obstacle, maybe even was bullied, comes on the show and amazes the judges and the audience with his or her talent, proving him or herself. It's the classic underdog story. In many ways, it's the American dream. With opportunity, anyone can make something of him or herself. Yet as moving as these stories are, there's something not quite right about them. Something that doesn't quite fit in with the gospel. We aren't given these type of stories in the Bible. Instead, the second reading today from 2 Corinthians gives us a different sort of story. St. Paul describes how after receiving a great vision of heaven, he receives a thorn in the flesh to keep him humble. We don't know exactly what that thorn was. It may have been some physical suffering, it could have been persecution, it could have even been some sort of a temptation. But we do know whatever it was very significant in his life. St. Paul begged the Lord 3 times to have the thorn removed, but Jesus did not. Instead, Jesus said to him, "My grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness." Do you hear that? My grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. How countercultural is that? Were these one of those stories on America's Got Talent? The story might have been that Paul overcame in spite of his weakness. But that's not what the scripture says. It was because of his weakness that God's power was made perfect. St. Paul even goes on to say that he boasts in his own weakness, in order that Christ may dwell with him. We might boast that we have overcome some difficulty in our lives, some flaw or disability. But how often do you hear people saying that they boast because of their weakness? And yet, that's the way of the saints. I think of Antonia Mayo, affectionately known as Nellie Leena, a little girl born in 1930 in Rome, who at the age of 5 was diagnosed with bone cancer and had her leg amputated as a result. And yet, Nennolina, though only a little girl, had an extraordinary faith. When her father asked her if she felt much pain after the amputation, she replied, "Daddy, the pain is like fabric. The stronger it is, the more value it has." She offered up her pain for the conversion of sinners, saying, "I am very happy that Jesus gave me this problem so that I may become his dearest one." She would pray, "Help me, grant me your grace, and give me back my leg. If you don't want to, then may your will be done." At the age of 6, she started school with a clumsy and painful prosthetic leg. But what was her response? May each step that I take be a little word of love. When you feel pain, you have to keep quiet and offer to Jesus for a sinner. In a letter to Jesus, she wrote, "Dear Jesus, I love you very much. I want to abandon myself in your hands. I want to abandon myself in your arms. Do with me what you want. Help me with your grace. You help me, since without your grace, I am nothing." Remember, she's just 6 years old. A few months later, she received First Communion and was confirmed. And a few months after that, the cancer began to spread again, and she died at only the age of 6.5. This is the epitome of weakness. A little girl dying of cancer at the age of 6. She did not overcome the cancer. She did not have the strength to beat it. But she understood the meaning of those words spoken to St. Paul. My grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. Today, little Nennolina is in the process of being canonized. She's right now venerable, which means there's 2 more steps, 2 more miracles that have to be approved before she can be fully canonized a saint. And her first miracle has already been attributed to her, though not approved yet, the healing of a woman with hepatitis C. Nennolina was not some great missionary, theologian, pope, or spiritual master. And yet this little girl is on her way to becoming the youngest saint in the church. What was her strength? It was her weakness. It was her utter dependence on God. And that is really the strength of all the saints. What are we doing when we pray to the saints? What are we doing when we ask for the Blessed Virgin Mary's protection? The saints themselves are not powerful, like some sort of superhero from a Marvel film. Their power rests in their prayer. It rests in their utter dependence on God. If you ask for Mary's protection, you're asking for her prayer. And that's the secret. Prayer is more powerful than the power of any superhero. Little Nennolina did not have the strength herself to overcome her own cancer. But now, through her prayer, people are being healed. She did not possess the power herself, but she became dependent on the only one who does. That is the power of weakness. That is why St. Paul says, "For when I am weak, then I am strong." It's a message we too often forget. You know, scientists have estimated that there are some 2 trillion galaxies in the universe. 2 trillion. That's enough for each human on Earth to have 500. And each of those galaxies is comprised of billions or even trillions of stars. And yet God holds every one of them in existence. And at the same time, He has counted the number of hairs on your head, and He cares for every moment of your life. What strength or ability could any of us have that compare with God? None of us has that sort of power. And He doesn't need our power. He needs our weakness. He needs our humility. Right now, across the Western world, there's a genocide through abortion against those with Down syndrome. Why? Because we as a society are afraid of weakness. In some countries in Europe, the number of people with Down syndrome has almost vanished. And it's not because they're finding a cure. It's because they're terminating them before they're even born. We've lost the ability to imagine how great of saints these people can become. Until we can look into the face of a person with Down syndrome and see the same potential to become a saint as when we look at St. John Paul II or Mother Teresa, we haven't fully understood the gospel. It's the same problem we have with our treatment of the elderly. Once people are no longer productive or autonomous in our culture, we have a tendency to forget them and abandon them to nursing homes or care centers and forget all about them. But again, it's because we fear weakness. Some people even push for euthanasia. And that's because we've taken pride in the sense of our own self-reliance, that we on our own power have what we need, and that therefore those without self-reliance are not contributing members of society. But to this mindset, the gospel, St. Paul, and little Nennolina give a profound challenge. When I am weak, then I am strong. My grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. Today we approach the Eucharist, where God will make present that once for all sacrifice of Jesus on the cross. That's the greatest moment of weakness in all history. God himself dying on the cross. And yet in that moment of utter weakness, God redeemed the world. May we humble ourselves like Christ did on the cross, like Nennolina did, like St. Paul did, and accept that it is in our weakness that God will redeem the world. Many of us face different weaknesses, different struggles in our lives. Maybe it's a marriage on the rocks. Maybe it's not living up to our parents' expectations. Maybe it's feeling like we're failed parents ourselves. Maybe it's broken relationships, struggles at work, physical illness, feelings of isolation and loneliness. Whatever weakness we have, God is inviting us to see that as an opportunity for his power to shine. God is inviting us to bring it forward today and offer it up with Jesus' sacrifice here in this Mass. Inviting us to let our weakness be the place where we see God's power, so that we can hear God's words that he spoke to St. Paul. My grace is sufficient for you, for power is made perfect in weakness. May we come like little Nennolina and offer our all to God.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the Father Bill's podcast. Well, Deacon Stephen Kenyon will be offering some more homilies while he's here with us this summer, and so there may be other opportunities to offer recordings of him instead of myself to kind of mix it up a little bit. And so I hope that'll be a good thing for everybody. Now, if you have any questions, as always, you can go to my website, fatherbill.org. That's FRBILL.org. And from there, you can email me. You can follow me on Twitter or Facebook. And I even have an Instagram account, which I don't use very much. But nonetheless, it's there. And until next time, may God bless you and have a great week. Bye-bye.